Hi, and welcome to another episode of Candor Beach's podcast. We are on episode 17, and today we are going to talk about the economy. So, Sailesh, what is your outlook for 2024?
I think it's economic doom. You know, um, we can back that claim up because we have Michael Burry betting 1.6 billion against the market, S&P 500 and Nasdaq. So I think that's mostly it's coming. It's gonna happen. The economy is gonna crash. I hope it's not gonna be huge, but our portfolio gonna sink. But anyways,
No, but let's speak a little more about the Michael Burry crash. Like, what, in your opinion, has raised flags? 1.6 billion is not a lot considering the size of most economies.
see, it's like a domino effect, right? So first we have the Chinese Evergrande, filing for bankruptcy. That's one of the major issues. It's one of the huge real estate giants in China. So
Mm-hmm.
they had about 300 billion in rotation, which actually they filed for bankruptcy. I mean, we all know that China has, lose loss. So with regards to this, that's one thing. Second, China finally entered into July. I think it's July. Yeah, July they entered into deflation. So there is that another major issue. So deflation is basically when your consumer price index collapses and everything is cheaper. But it's not good for the economy either. It's not like everything you find it cheap is not good because the entire producer market is going to collapse too.
Right, so it affects growth, and there is no doubting the Chinese slowdown. People have been talking about how China has been importing less metals. People have been talking about the occasional industry collapse. And with Evergrande collapsing, that is going to be a huge hole that the real estate market has to fill. And we will talk about real estate in general, but if you could circle back to the Michael Burry statement that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
about Michael Burry's statement was scary for you? And Michael
So
Burry didn't make any statement. It was more of news channels picking it up that when they looked at the 13F filing of Michael Burry's Scion, was it Scion? Am I pronouncing it right?
yeah, Cyan Capital. Yeah, Cyan
Right.
Capital. I mean, first thing is what made me actually look into it is his previous 2008 bet against the market, which actually
Which is
was
what the
very,
media is driving at as well. Like,
yeah.
I'm
So
sure he's been
which
picked
is
up for that.
which is which has a little bit of good and bad to it.
Hmm.
But then what if it's true? Is what my question is. Like if his prediction comes out to be true, and we are stuck holding the bag, so or who is. So another thing is all the billionaires liquidated assets, huge amount of stocks and shares in 2022. Elon Musk liquidated, Jeff Bezos liquidated. So they are getting ready to not hold the bag too much. So
Look,
there are
they
clues there.
liquidated their holdings in 2022, like you said,
Hmm.
but that was, and we saw a downturn early 2023.
Hmm.
So are we not past that? The Fed started tightening the belt by increasing interest rates over the last year. Uh, and that was to control inflation. And now we are seeing a period where inflation is finally stagnating. It isn't slowing down per se, but it is stagnating. We are in an era of high inflation. We are almost, by definition, in a stagflation sort of a setup.
Mm.
Unemployment is not high at this point in time, thankfully.
Yeah,
So
the
aren't we
major
past that? Aren't we past that particular decision, the 2022 decision that we saw?
I think the major reason for stagflation is the supply issues. Like we have massive supply issues because of the war which is going on, Ukraine, Russia war. So there's always going to be until that war is over and there is some peace negotiation happening. They're going to be grain deficit. They're going to be, massive amounts of food deficits all over the world because Ukraine is supposed to be the biggest supplier of wheat,
The
right?
breadbasket, right? But
Yeah. So
there are going to be other countries that are going to try and fill up that hole.
yeah, but that's not happening. India already banned. India is one of the biggest exporters of food.
But that was reactionary, right? That was like
So that to protect
2022's
Indian
decisions were
Indian
reactionary.
yeah, that is to protect Indian interests. So for Indian security, food security, they had to ban wheat exports because if everything's gone out of India, that's going to be a huge issue. India also banned rice exports, and it's also contemplating on banning sugar.
It has banned sugar exports, I think. We have banned sugar.
It's already banned. Okay.
I believe so. Like that's what I read. I hope I comprehended that right. But in terms of deficits that we saw in, let's say, that were reported earlier on in the year, I feel like there are going to be institutions around the world that are going to work on filling that hole. Like the US produces a lot of wheat, as an example. When I was studying in the US, there was this one course that I took. I think it was African economics, if I remember correctly. And in this African economics class, we were talking about, or we were exploring how the US produces an excess, and some of that excess is passed on to these countries because when they tried to give these countries money, the disbursement of the money didn't work out very well. Like there was uneven distribution of this money, so they figured that if they instead gave their excess production to these countries, then they would be doing, and that has economic implications as well. I won't get into that. My point is there is surplus production in parts of the world. They will fill that hole up. It's not that every industry is going to be affected and impacted for years to come. People are going to look at filling up that hole. Like as an example, we are already seeing how Russia's increased trade with its partners in India and China. The Indian rupee we thought was going to strengthen because of the transactions in the ruble INR, but that has been affected because Russia does not import a lot of things from us. But Russia imports quite a bit from China. The world imports from China. So when you were talking about Evergrande, and I would like to circle back to that conversation as well, about the slowdown in China. But when you were talking about the slowdown in China, it makes sense that it's going to impact the rest of the world because Russia, like most of the world, imports quite a bit from China. So now they're demanding our purchase transactions to be done in yuan because yuan is worth a little more. There are a lot of countries that accept INR, but it's not significant enough versus the yuan, as an example. So I disagree with the I don't strongly disagree. I just feel like it's not going to be as impactful. The war was impactful for sure, but there are holes that are being filled up elsewhere.
So if you look back, so I'll give you a rebuttal for your question. So what I think about it is China exports are not food source or food or energy. China exports manufactured goods like like electronics and other raw chemicals to India, like to make pharmaceutical products, APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients. But when you look at Russia, what it exports is energy and food, which are the most important parts of it. So when you cut those down, price is going to shoot up the roof. So that's what happened. You notice as soon as the war started, the crude oil shot up. Even now, Russia is major part of the OPEC countries, which can actually control the entire the crude value. So the Brent crude value is depending on how Russia and Saudi Arabia control the supply of the number of barrels and being pumped every day. So energy and food, you take those. Those are the major, way more important than what China exports.
Look, I'm not saying it didn't have an impact. I'm saying that that impact is going to be covered up. It's not going to. It's like people aren't going to sit for a year and do nothing, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Then what will be the cause for the upcoming market crash? What do you think it's
You
gonna
predicted the upcoming market crash. I am
mean,
questioning your statements on the upcoming market
I
crash.
agree. No. I'm asking you a question. What do you think, in your perspective, it's going to be the upcoming market crash cause?
But I never said there was going to be a market crash.
Okay, you don't. Okay, okay.
I don't know for sure. There could be a market crash. I feel like there are institutions like we've, and this is off of news articles online. BlackRock looks to be exiting the US. There are other institutions like Blackstone, State Street, Vanguard that are potentially reducing their positions in the US market. And that speaks volumes because they hold for a massive chunk, right? Like almost 80% of 80% of ownership of the companies in the US stock market is by these people, by these institutions. So that is likely to have an effect, or that is likely a leading indicator stating that we are in for turbulent times. But how impactful that is going to be, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know whether it's going to lead to an entire crash. I feel like there's going to be a shock for sure. There is an impending shock that the market is going to get. And that could be primarily driven by the fact that even with the high interest rates that we've seen so far, the inflation has not fallen sufficiently. It is not under control just yet. Another thing is that there are bubbles that are coming up in various industries. I was talking about how we'd circle back to real estate, so I think this is a good opportunity to do so. The housing prices across let's not talk about the housing prices first. Let's talk about rental properties to begin with. Rental properties are becoming fewer and fewer in the market because people are finding it hard to service their mortgages, to pay off the properties that they purchased and leased out. And that's because of rising interest rates, obviously. Now, because they're selling off their properties, there are fewer rental properties available across the board, across the world, and that is what is potentially making it hard. It's increasing cost of living for everybody. So there is going to be pressure on wage demands eventually. Because if it gets more expensive for me and I'm used to a certain lifestyle, I am going to ask for more, or I'm going to want for more. And there are things that I, as an individual, would want to do to increase what is the resources that are available to me. 2021, 2022, the job market was incredibly hot. You saw people moving from one company to another. You saw people jumping ship for the 30% hike, or 50% hike, sometimes even 100% hike. There were very, very high salaries in 2021, 2022. Early 2023, we saw a lot of things collapse. That was what I was getting at with respect to your statement about billionaires selling. We saw the market contract to an extent wherein we saw companies laying off more people. This pressure on real estate is also going to see spending come down because renting has suddenly become more expensive. And who rents? Gen X, or maybe Gen Z? We are Gen Y.
Millennials too.
Oh, pardon me. I got that wrong. I meant Gen Y and Gen Z. So millennials and Gen Z, not Gen X. Sorry. Gen X owns properties. It's Gen Y and Gen Z that are primarily renters in this economy. And so it's going to put pressure on them, and they're going to contract their expenses elsewhere. And that's going to affect consumer-focused companies. That's going to affect, and which in turn is going to affect manufacturing. And so there is going to be a little bit of a shock for sure. An entire downturn, an entire recession, I don't think so, because over the last year, there has been significant scrutiny over whether we are going to head into a soft landing, a hard landing, whether we are going to have an outright recession. I feel like we have geared up sufficiently for a soft landing.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be soft landing.
Yeah, you were talking about a full-on recession,
it's
aren't
going
you?
to be a market correction like the effect of 2008. But the thing, I think what's going to turbocharge it is, this new BRICS currency coming up, the BRICS alliance, and just added Saudi Arabia into the group. Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to be part of BRICS from 2024, January 2024, and they're turbocharging the entire. They want to launch a currency which is not based off of yuan because other countries actually turned it down, but a completely new currency, which is each and every currency is pegged to it, which is based off probably gold. But that's going to shake up the market because it's going to shake up the entire dollar supremacy, the reserve currency, the euro supremacy. It's going to shake it up. If that's going to come up because it's August, right? So they already had those meetings
Yeah, but
done.
why would you launch a new currency and particularly affect its adoption, affect its usage, affect its value if you saw an economic downturn? It's like with, and this might not be the right comparison, but I'm thinking about IPOs and ICOs. Like, let's just focus on the IPOs. You don't IPO in a down market. Like, you typically wouldn't want to because that's going to affect your launch price, which is going to affect your subsequent pricing. So why would you debut a new currency at
Very
this
good
point in time?
question. So in a downturn, like when the market goes down, right? So the market goes down. What are you going to go back to? Your safe assets like gold. You have gold, bonds, and all these stuff. So if you bring in an alternate currency, which is backed by gold, people are going to, and which is also going to, challenge the dollar. Which has been very, very, hostile towards people or countries which are not, which don't follow their rules, SWIFT rules. So the countries which are in this new block are going to try and, peg their entire currency to it. So of course they're going to be a shift towards the dollar-based currencies to, a BRICS-based currency.
No, I understand the want for it. I understand the dollar hegemony has not been well received across the world, and particularly because it's been on for so long, for how many years now? About 80 years, 70, 80 years, like 1946, say like 1950 up until now.
No,
70 years.
After the
Oh,
Great
1970, right? Like post the,
yeah.
what was that thing? The Brentwood agreement.
When the Federal Reserve was established. So the 1920s, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So the 80, about 100 years now.
I'm looking up the Brenton Woods agreement. Like, what date was it? I hope that's quick, because that signifies the agreement, right? Like, move from the dollar. I mean, move from gold. 1944.
Oh, so that was after
About 80.
right after the war, World War II.
Yeah, about 80 years then.
Yeah.
Nearly 80 years. Yeah. So where were we? Yeah, the currency.
No,
I understand the want for it. I understand the need for it, but I don't necessarily know if the timing's right. Like why I was saying it's going to be a shock and then it's not going to be a full-time, full-fledged, not one with the words today. It's not going to be a full-fledged downturn is because there are a few factors. There are companies that are still IPOing. There have been a few companies that are coming out. The developing countries, this side of the world, the growth rates aren't as affected. IMF's predictions aren't as harsh. Like as an example, India is set to still grow close to like it was 7.2% in 2022, about 6.6ish%, and between like 6 and 7% consistently for 2023 and 2024. China is going through a little bit of a economic hiccup. And while 2023 has been a little bit has been a little hard for the EU and the UK, I feel like I don't feel like I know the IMF's predictions are positive for the next year.
okay.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
this was made in July 2023. We'll have the link in the bio, but 2023 July, that's
honestly,
recent
I
enough.
don't want the economy to crash, but I'd rather be prepared, right? So,
Yeah,
and
but
our viewers to be prepared.
I
Or,
get what you're saying, and here's a thought, and take it or leave it. But are you familiar with prospect theory, loss
uh,
aversion?
yeah, I read
I'll
about
do
it.
a
Not,
refresher for all of us.
yeah,
So
sure.
what it says is basically like if you have equal probability for, let's say, a gain of $10 or a loss of $10, or let's make it really hurt, a gain of $1,000 or a loss of
Mhm.
$1,000, people would typically value that loss a little more than they would value that gain. So even if you have a 50-50% chance, and if I said $1,000 or $10 or something that doesn't hurt at all, you
Hmm.
would probably roll the dice and be like, yeah, it's only $10. But if it's $1,000 and $1,000, or even $1,000 and $800 even, you might not even play. Just be like, yeah, no, I'm good. I don't want to lose 800. The point is, prospect theory states that people tend to overvalue their losses. And that loss aversion, that want to not lose, governs a lot of our actions, which is why, in my opinion, you see a lot of content out there which are fear mongering. Like the whole conversation about Michael Burry, 1.6 billion, not a lot, considering the assets under management for institutions like the one he runs. Like Berkshire Hathaway's assets under management are what, 300 trillion or something of that sort? Massive. So 1.6 billion is not something that it is significant, but it's not extraordinary. At the same time, 1.6 billion constitutes the value of the contracts total, but that
Yeah.
isn't necessarily the price that he paid for those contracts, because option
Mhm.
contracts are cheaper than the values, right?
Way
Like
too.
we
Yeah.
know we've lost a lot of money in options, so we should know. So there was a gentleman that did the math, and he speculates that about 40,000 put contracts were purchased, which again isn't a lot. There is speculation that either Burry was talking about a small dip over a long period of time or a really massive dip over a short period of time. It is hard to say because we don't have enough information beyond the fact that he has puts. The 13F uh, filing does not require you to put in short positions. It just asks you to put in long positions. And you have to file within 45 days of your of the last quarter, which is why it just came out a few days ago, the 13F filing. I think he filed on the 18th of August, if I remember correctly. So 7 days as of this recording. And we don't know when he took this position. We don't know what strike price he took this position in. We don't know what the expiry date is. And therefore, I would say that let's not put in too much emphasis into what he has done.
So I'm not denying that, like to add on to your conversation
Mm.
or your argument, he does have long positions on, like certain. He has it on Discovery. He has certain long position on travel stocks. So
Yeah, there are
with
25 new stocks
yeah,
he added into his portfolio, according to the 13F filing.
exactly. So he might be hedging them. He's just hedging this
Purchase,
options,
yeah.
short position just to hedge onto the long positions he already had.
And to the
So
Chinese slowdown, like, sorry, just to get this in, to the Chinese slowdown that we were talking about, he exited JD and Alibaba, JD.com and Alibaba, which was about 25% of his portfolio, apparently.
no, but more than Michael Burry, I think what's going to spill over, going to cause this economic crash is China. Michael Burry is just maybe a pawn. He's nothing big in there. But I think what's going to be huge is because of China. It's going to be like the COVID.
Okay.
The COVID spilled over the world. They're bringing over the economic collapse now.
Listen, you had better be careful. You remember how at one point in time people were talking about there was a xenophobic push on because of COVID. Like we aren't pushing for that. Like we should be careful. I think China's effect is going to be significant because a lot of countries are also shifting manufacturing from China. They've been looking to shift from manufacturing from China for a while now. They've been looking at Southeast Asia and now India. A lot of countries are entering India from for manufacturing. I think Siemens was looking at that. Apple is looking at that. So good for India. Not great for China because obviously an exit isn't going to help. But at the same time, it's not an economic downturn, is it? Because you're exiting from one country, you're putting that same money into another country because you expect demand. Apple is launching its Vision Pro. We did a podcast episode on that, like episode 5 or 6 or something of that sort.
Mission Vision Pro.
Yeah. So Apple is launching its Vision Pro in 2024. Apple is a massive chunk of Berkshire Hathaway's portfolio. And Warren Buffett said that he understands Apple's direction, which is why his position is so massive on Apple. And it has contributed significantly to Berkshire Hathaway's position. So if Apple's betting that 2024 is the right year for this product, for whatever reason, like it could be because they have engineering and design decisions that they need to resolve or manufacturing that they need to resolve or what have you, they aren't seeing that 2024 is going to be a shit year. They're not tightening their belts. That was something that we saw during the lockdown. That was something that we saw during the start of this year. There were people, there were individuals, there were indicators that said that there was going to be a downturn and we needed to brace for it. And we expect this downturn to unravel by the end of the year. And I feel like that's something that we are seeing.
Hopefully.
So shock will come in at some point in time because the market frequently goes through those cycles. But I don't think it's going to be like a recession-sized shock. I hope it's not going to be a recession-sized shock. I feel like the economy is trying to equip itself to brace for impact. And I'm seeing that because, like, to quote the IMF about some of these decisions, they were talking about how there is a risk for with persistent higher costs. Financial sector turbulence was something that we needed to be mindful of. There is a spillover from the slowdown from China. There is higher debt distress all around the world, but we are aware of all of these things, and therefore there are steps that are being taken. Like for one, I'm sure there's going to be we can expect a hike in your repo rates your interest rates across the globe. The RBI is likely to, or sorry, the MPC, the Monetary Policy Community, might come out and hike our rates. What's the date? I've written it down somewhere. They're coming out on October 4th to 6th. So October 4th to 6th, that's something that we need to consider. And then again in December, there is a conversation about how the Fed might come out and make one final precautionary hike to curb inflation. Yeah, what's funny?
I just hope you're right and it doesn't crash. But the Fed might come in and do 100 basis points. Like that's going to be
1%.
devastating.
Man, I think we're good. But do you mind if we talk about India for a bit?
Sure.
Like the benefits from India, because when we were talking about the manufacturing moving from China to India, I was just thinking, because of the war that you cited earlier on, and I was talking about how demand shifted, demand hasn't stopped. Russia's production has moved to India. Some of the orders that some companies are getting are now in India, and you can see that reflected in our stock market for certain manufacturing companies. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but you know what I'm talking about. The Chinese slowdown is going to obviously be a catalyst towards pushing demand towards India. We get discounted oil, and I don't know for how much longer we're going to get that, but we have been getting discounted oil, which obviously helps keep our costs down. I think India's currency will continue to weaken because as long as we are trading with Russia, they are going to want the renminbi to be the currency of preference. But at the same time, because our currency is going to be a little weaker than it was, let's say, last year, we are going to be able to pull in more because weak currency exports, weak currency benefits. Like that's why China had their currency depressed for a while because they were a primary exporter. So I think that's going to be to our benefit should we get to that position. And I think that there are circumstances that are gearing us for that, like the Make in India movement that the BJP had started all those years ago. The fact that manufacturing is moving to India, and with a weakening rupee, we are going to be able to get more foreign currency in, which is going to stabilize the rupee for sure. What else? I talked about how China's one of the largest importers of metal, one of the largest consumers of metal. That the fact that there is a slowdown there might impact prices, which might benefit India.
So there's another major thing which happened. We have India-China relations thawing, right? So we have that they're de-escalating in the border at Ladakh. So which is pretty good, more bilateral trade. With especially it's going to help China more than us because they're looking at a downturn. So more bilateral trade is probably good for them. So, and regardless, even if India grows at like 5%, it's still going to be by 2028. It's going to be the third biggest economy.
Predicted at 6%, by the way, like 6.5%, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm saying I took an even lower number. Even if you do it at 5%, it's still going to be the third biggest economy by 2028. So, which is in a very good trajectory.
Which positively impacts that whole brain drain conversation that we've had for God knows how long. I think during like very recently, the Prime Minister was also talking about, Narendra Modi was also talking about that, which is a good thing for us.
He said, I mean, regardless, one thing is he said, if you elect him, he's gonna make India, into a third biggest economy. But regardless of it, it's still gonna be the biggest economy by 2028. But he might just gonna turbocharge it because he has very good policies when it comes to making it in India, bringing foreign investment to India.
Right. I feel like the ship is adequately directed in that, it has been directed in that space, and hopefully we get there.
Well,
cool.
I think we covered all the points.
All right, so conclusions. Your conclusion is that we are going to see a massive crash?
Yes.
Is that still your conclusion?
Yes, it's coming. It's going to come, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right, but then
no. So I believe that when I say there's a shock, I believe that we are going to see a pullback. We are going to see a market correction, but I'm seeing that, or I'm hoping for it to correct quickly, like for there to be a correction and there to be immediate stability, not a persistent or a continuous downturn. That's what I'm getting at.
Fingers crossed. Hopefully you're right. Yeah.
Hopefully. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Goodbye.